Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I start a little project with postcards. I'm going to be using a technique I've been practicing for a little while. If you follow along with my videos, then you know I did a Beatrix Potter series where I studied the work of Beatrix Potter. So I'm using her technique in this one, and I'm going to make a series of postcards based on the flowers that my husband grows in our backyard. So as we're getting started here, I have 140-pound paper. This was 100% cotton paper, and I'll have all of that listed down below. It is cold press. I am using the Sailor Fude de Mannen pen. This has polar brown ink from the Noodler's brand ink. And again, I will have all of that listed below where I got my ink and all of the links for that if you want to check it out for yourself. So I have pre-drawn this, and now I'm just coming back and going over the lines. And as Beatrix Potter did in her art, I am trying to use both thick and thin lines, so I'm using weighted lines. I'm also allowing some space or some gaps between these lines so that you can freely flow through the piece. It also helps, and I noticed this with Miss Potter's work, it also helps when you're working with flowers to have those spaces, particularly on the end of the petals. It creates more of a delicate area there. So I'm going to do as I have done for all of my other pieces, and if you've watched my videos, you know this is atypical for me. I am taping it down to my desk. Now I have some tea. This was Earl Grey tea. You can use any kind of tea. Unfortunately, the tea bag that I was using for my afternoon tea was just totally spent. I couldn't get a good jar of tea out of it. So I went ahead and used a new bag. It seemed like such a waste, but it smelled wonderful because it was Earl Grey. So I'm doing a second coat here. And the reason I taped it down, if you've watched me before and you know that I don't normally tape it down, this was such a tiny piece and I was putting so much water on it. I didn't want it to warp too much on me. The larger pieces don't warp that much, but when you get to these smaller pieces, they do warp quite a bit. And the tape I'm using is just some washi tape that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And if you're unfamiliar with the Dollar Tree in the US, it's a store that everything is just like $1.25. I kid you not. So I just picked up some cheap stuff there. I did blow dry it between layers and I put 3 layers on. Now I am using my size 8 round and my size 2 round from the Royal and Langnickel Zen series. I have 1 cup of water. I have my microfiber cloth. You can use any kind of cloth. And then I have my watercolors, and these are the Winsor Newton watercolors. But if you've watched my videos before, you know that I have put it in a different little tray here because it just works better for doing demos for you guys. So up in the upper left hand corner, you can see this is from last year's garden. These were beautiful purple flowers and we couldn't find any this year. They were supposed to come back year after year, but ours died. I don't know, Arkansas, sometimes we have mild winters, sometimes we have hard winters, but those little flowers didn't like living here. So you can see on the screen, I'm starting with some French ultramarine blue, some alizarin crimson, and I'm going to mix these two together to get that purple that you see there. And this is just my first layer, my first, I guess you call a glaze. I am going to put more than 1 layer on because I have done that with my Beatrix Potter work, and you'll notice quite a bit. I'm going to reach over to the side. My brush will disappear, and that's because you can see right there how the water's pulling up just a bit. I don't want it to be too wet. So I'm drying my brush just a tad because if you get too much water in it, then it varies from what Miss Potter did with her work, which is more of what I have called a bride brush technique. So don't want too much water in it. I didn't really have to prime, and I've not mentioned this in other videos before when I've done her work, but I didn't really have to prime or I guess you would say set up the paper. And usually what I do is put water on it. It releases that sizing in there and it keeps your watercolor from bubbling up on top because I put the coffee or the tea on there, I have painted with coffee before, and we'll have to do that. It smells so wonderful. But because I put the tea on there, that kind of primed it for me, so I can just automatically come back in and put all of these colors on top, and they're not going to bubble up on me. So I'm going to put a layer of this on, and then I'm going to hit the green on the stems, and then I'll hop back on and talk to you in just a minute. You'll notice that I have made the green in the tray, and I did make a yellow green, but on the paper it looks even more yellow. That is because we have that underpainting of tea on there, and because that has sort of a yellow creamy tint to it, that affects the paint that we are putting on top. So whenever you have an underpainting like that, especially in watercolor, because things are transparent, you have to keep in mind how it's going to affect your colors. I wanted it this way because this was an outside piece or outside photo, and there was a lot of sunlight on those leaves, so I'm going to go ahead and give a nice yellow green underneath, and then I'm going to come back on top, layer some more colors, and color correct in areas where I need it to be darker and where I need the stems to have a little more brown or a little more red. I really love this plant because it did have a variance in the color on the stem and going into the leaves. So really neat little plant. I don't know what it's called. If you know what it's called, let me know about down below. And if you would like for me to post this on my blog, the reference photo, I will do that for you. If you'd like to follow along or just make your own art, let me know and I will get that up for you. I do not mind at all. I was painting, I noticed that this little stem went off into nothingness, and I looked at my reference photo, and I do this sometimes. I'm terrible about this. I will forget to draw certain elements. So I forgot to draw that, and I have gone ahead at this point. You'll see there's color on it. That didn't make it bleed. I know it looks like the lines are super thick on that little bud coming out, and they were, and the reason for that is that I dropped my pen from the time that I stopped drawing this to where you saw me pick it up just now. I actually dropped it on my floor with the cap off, and before I did, I reached for it and stabbed my hand in the palm of my hand. Didn't make a mark, but it did hurt. But I did not get the ink cleaned off the back of it, and so it made that super thick. But we're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it. So hang in there. I know it bled. I did have to wait quite a few minutes, probably about, I don't know, maybe about 10 or 15 minutes before I went back up there. I'm having tea while I'm painting this, so I just had a little tea break, and I went ahead and let that dry and then came back in and put the color on it. So it will get better, I promise. And just in case you missed it, I added a little Payne's gray into the mix so I could give a little bit more of a blue gray. And that's going to go in the centers. The centers were almost black, but I didn't want to make them black, so I altered the color a bit. And I'm going to come back in, as you see, with a little more alizarin crimson so I can get back more of the red violet. And because this is all dried, I let all of this dry. I didn't dry it with a hair dryer. Again, I'm drinking tea. I just had a tea break. And now I'm coming back on top, and the paint's just a little bit thicker than what it was previously. But I have that glaze underneath, and it's allowing me to come on top and create all of these shadows. So I'm going to be adding some shadows here, and we're going to carry that all the way through, and then we're going to come back to the stem and start adding a little bit of detail there. To get the green for the stem, I used the sap green and the cadmium-free yellow because that yellow has a little bit more of a warmth to it, and that's what I wanted for the stem. So I'm putting the French ultramarine blue in that mix so that I can get, it's almost what I would term a grass green on there. Adding that on, and something I'm doing a little bit differently with the stem in this process than what I did for the flowers, because I let the flowers dry. I'm going back and forth because you see I'm getting some burnt sienna here, and I'm going to put it right on top of the wet. That allows me to blend those colors through. I saw that quite a bit in Beatrix Potter's work. She would have the colors where they are flowing and mixing together. So she did that while the colors were still wet. So I didn't want this to dry. I wanted to give that effect. And we had a little break there. As you saw, I was having some trouble with the stem because I painted outside the line. I really need a size 6 round, but I haven't made it by Michael's to pick one up yet. So I'm just using the size 8. So I just, if you've seen the videos, you know I don't like the size 2. I think it's too small. I use it occasionally if I have tiny details, but this needed something in between. So I'm going to get a size 6. So I'm going to keep on with this, and you'll see I'm going to go back and forth with the burnt sienna and picking up the blues, and I'm going to be tapping them in, and everything is still wet. I'm not letting this part dry. I want the colors to mix and flow together. Again, the center of those flowers are super dark, so I am using that French ultramarine, and then I'm using the cadmium-free red, and those two colors together, and I just go ahead and mix it with everything because I'm not going to be putting any more layers on. This is strictly for those centers. That is going to give me a nice dark in the middle without bringing black into the mix. However, I am going to use black. Now, that usually goes against everything for me when I paint. I don't like using black. I tend to think more like an impressionist artist, but I am going to use black, and I'm going to use it with that green. You're going to see that coming up in just a minute. And then when we get to the end of the video, you're going to see me do something that Beatrix Potter would not have done. I have not seen it in any of her work, but I'm going to be picking up my Posca pen and putting some white highlights. So stay tuned for that. So the reason I decided to use black is because I want this green. This is the color of green that I want. I don't want to change it with blue. I don't want to change it with red. I don't want to change it with yellow. I want this blue. I just want a shade of it. And really the only way you can make a shade like that is to add black. So we have black in there, and you can see it's the same green. It's just a different shade. Just a few more touches here, and this postcard will be finished. Postcard number 1 in my series. Thank you so much for joining me. I am always happy when each of you are here and when you comment and share below. And again, let me know if you want this reference in the comments below. I will put that on my blog, and I'll put the link in the description if you want it. And as promised, here's that Posca pen. I know she did not use it, but if she had it, perhaps she would have used one of those back then. So again, I thank you so much for joining me. I am going to have some more Beatrix Potter art coming up. If you've not watched those, I'll link those down below. I'm going to have some more Impressionist paintings in my sketchbook. And until then, I will see you in the next one.